because strength is the way you interact with the world. And the moment you start trying to maintain is when you start regressing, not because you're trying to, but because you may start letting yourself off the hook for those most stimulating repetitions, which are the highest effort repetitions. And you may not realize that you don't need to go all the way to task failure to get a stimulus. Twice a week's more comprehensive. It is faster towards that ceiling, but it's not twice as good, twice as fast, or twice as effective. And so if you can't do twice a week because it's cost too much or you don't have the time, we can take you the whole distance with once a week. And as it turns out, you have to do this stuff until you die anyway. If you can do once a week without fail between now and death, you're going to accrue all the possible benefits that you can get. It's just going to take longer to get there. Okay. But what are you in a hurry for?
Lawrence Snell here, and welcome back to High Intensity Business, your one-stop shop for growing your strength training business and fueling your passion for high intensity training. Today, we welcome back Skyler Tanner, owner of Smart Strength Austin, who's been on the podcast many times. We even started doing a random hour, trying to copy what Tim Ferriss and Kevin Rose were doing at one stage.
We did.
But we haven't kept it going. We need to do one of those again soon.
We do.
Different focus today, right? So today we're going to be addressing the common questions that our colleagues who are running strength training businesses and the trainers get from clients. And sometimes they can be quite difficult to address effectively, to help the client understand. And we're going to be kind of role playing this today. I'm going to try and be the client and ask these questions and then transition from role play to normal talk and maybe talk about what we just spoke about. We'll just kind of see how it goes. And as I was saying to you, Skyler, before we got started, I just think you're so well placed to do this with, because you have a way, you've been in this business for a long time, and you have a great way of handling some of these questions without talking about Arthur Jones and all the history of HIIT, and also without being a dogmatic about it. Right. And I think that's what makes you so effective as a salesperson, because it was a surprise to you that you were so good at selling this stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's funny how all those things that you never wanted to do actually turn out to be the thing you're probably best at. Selling ideas. To Sell is Human, which is a great book. But it's also, like, at the end of the day, the idea of trying to convince somebody of at least a piece of your position is, we're always doing that, like, as humans. And so in this line of work, you're always having to remind people of why they are there, because that helps them focus on what they are doing in the moment. And sort of like how when clients come in the front door, I'm trying to encourage them, as part of being the best part of their day, to leave. The rest of their life is going to be out that front door. This is space for you. And as a result of that, I'm going to take care of everything. You don't need to decide anything. We're going to have dialogue as often as we need to around this stuff, but the workouts are going to be built by an educated expert exercise physiologist to move you in the right direction towards your goals. And if you have no specific goals, you just want to be a generally capable human because, you have all sorts of things you value, you want to show up for in a certain way, then we're going to make sure that happens as well. Simultaneously, if you're going to leave all of your life out there, most clients are going to leave much of what we told them in here, in the facility, as well they should. There's no quiz. I'm not going to come back. All right, what did I tell you last week? So you should expect, as part of the customer service experience, to always be reminding or constantly touching back on things you've spoken about. As I'm saying that, it comes to mind what it's in, I think, Religion for Atheists, I think, is the book. The book is Religion for Atheists, which was written by the guy who eventually started a YouTube channel called The School of Life, and I'm forgetting his name. He's British. And he talked about how in Western society, there's this sort of philosophical idea of, like, we're going to tell you one time, and you're expected to remember it forever. But in religions, the expectation is you're always being reminded of these lessons. Like, you're going to church on Sunday and you're learning, or you're being reminded of some variation of something you've heard before.
So just a different story exploring the same idea.
The context or metaphor or allegory or whatever value set. And part of our job is a big part of that if you're going to keep people engaged for the long term, middle long term, because that's where the value of the workouts are anyway.
Yeah, we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught, in a nutshell, right?
Right.
That's it. Yeah, I'd probably say, I swear I've said that like in the last 4 podcasts because it just keeps coming up right now. Okay, let's get into role play. So I am Mr. Client, and I'm just going to start hitting you with some questions, and
Sure.
we'll see where it goes. Okay.
Sure.
Okay. So, Skyler, what about cardio? What about my cardio? How do I get fit? How's the
Sure.
strength training going to help me with that?
Sure. So, this is a great question, and there's no history lesson here, but it's important to know that part of the reason maybe cardio has been elevated to the extent that it has is that it was something we could measure a really long time ago, whereas we couldn't measure the benefits of resistance training beyond, hey, those guys lift weights, they get strong, and their muscles get big, up until much later in kind of a medical or health outcome perspective. Now, we much better understand that lifting weights improves your cardio, but not in the way you think. If everything in your life is easier, you tend to do more of it and accrue more time at this low intensity cardiovascular state. And when you get fitter still, the stronger you are, things that, going on a bike ride, instead of trying to judge it or grade it and say, okay, this is my cardio workout, you do it because it's fun, because it feels good to move in your body. Oh, and by the way, you're going to accrue a lot of low intensity, steady state type movement, which certainly does correlate with improvements in all-cause mortality and health outcomes. It's a little bit like flipping the pyramid, though. Oftentimes, people are told. I mean, maybe you've been told this, right? You're coming in for strength training, but what's the messaging you're hearing? It's often like, hey, you need to go doing a lot of walking and things of that nature to kind of get yourself in shape, and then, oh, maybe you should do some strength training. But if you're strong, then that stuff doesn't feel like a burden at the limits of your capacity, like what we need to keep doing in here does, right? Because we need this to be challenging in order to be a stimulus. That sort of stuff by design is an accrual of time and effort. So if you go walking with a friend, being here in Austin, I'm going to talk about Town Lake or the Hill Country. If you're going for a walk with friends around Town Lake, the 3-mile loop might be a challenge right now, but as you get stronger, suddenly you'll be doing the 4 or the 5-mile loop, not because you're trying to get a better workout, but because you're not thinking about it as a workout. You're just talking with your friend. And then, oh, by the way, you just walked 5 miles. So that's been demonstrated in postpartum women and 90-year-old community dwelling individuals, where if you make them stronger, they move more spontaneously. So you're going to get that in the bargain. But if for some reason you want that feeling of being out of breath or gassed or needing more cardio, we can rebuild the workout to be much more metabolically demanding while still at least preserving the strength and muscle tissue that you've built prior to that request. So, we have the tools for that. We can rebuild the workout to do that. But in the beginning, you'll be surprised at how just getting stronger is going to lead to those outcomes that you've heard so much about from low intensity cardio.
But Skylar, I was always told that I've got to do weight training to build my muscles, and then I got to run outside. I got to run a couple of times a week to build up my cardio. Are you saying that I don't need to do the latter, or what are you saying there?
What I'm saying is that a lot of what you've heard, it comes from these large surveys, epidemiological studies, and they're blunt instruments, and they're trying to look at populations of people and then stratify their movement patterns based on a survey. Because could you imagine how difficult it would be to measure everybody in a large data set for their cardiovascular capacity? Because we could do that in a lab. I mean, with my background in clinical cardiovascular rehabilitation, you'd put somebody on a treadmill, you'd strap on all the leads, and you'd say, we're going to look at your heart. You can't do that for a population. So where a lot of these public health guidelines come from, which is what you're talking about, where they say do 150 minutes of low intensity, steady state activity. They don't call it cardio, they'll say low intensity, steady state, or vigorous intensity, steady state work, comes from are those surveys and those ideas. Now, it's important to note 150 minutes of low intensity, steady state work as defined by the American College of Sports Medicine, which is our gold standard certifying body here in the United States, is like a 20 to 21 minute per mile walk. That's a saunter. That is not a run. That is not super intense. And what happens when you go past that vigorous intensity point is that it becomes difficult to do a sort of dose response relationship. When we look at all of this stuff, this is why when you see do resistance training and a lot of walking, you approach the type of health outcomes that you would get with more structured work, because the resistance training is difficult to quantify from a cardiovascular perspective at a population level. But what we do know for sure is that 30 to 60 minutes of resistance training a week, you hit the bottom of the range for reductions in all-cause mortality and improvements in relative risk ratio of any disease. And if you're stronger, you're going to get 150 minutes of walking around per week that we see associated with these massive disease risk reductions, because it's just easy to do. They're not asking you to run. In fact, the guidelines are not saying run this much, because your average American can't run. They're not strong enough. They're not fit enough to go on a run. Putting them on a treadmill to walk or an elliptical is controlling those forces, and they're not going at the output that they would need to just to run.
Okay.
You're going to get that in the bargain. And then if all of a sudden you want to start running, you've built a platform with all of your strength to then start doing that. But that's not a requirement for these.
So I don't need to do that to be healthy. I can just do what we're doing here. Is that right?
You do what you're doing here. And then what I tell people is think about things that you used to do, assuming an injury didn't stop you from doing it. Let's say time or fitness. You just felt like it stopped being fun because you were being challenged at the limits of your capacity at the time. You may find yourself picking those hobbies up again and doing more of them or better, or finding things that you value more highly and using that to guide your efforts away from here. I'll give you an example. Last year, I had 4 clients go to Spain and walk the Camino because they're devout Catholics. Now, when they started with me, they did not ask, hey, Skyler, I want to get strong so I can eventually walk the Camino. That was not even in the sphere of awareness in their life. I've been training them so long that when they arrived at realizing that they could go on this pilgrimage, or they would want to go on this pilgrimage, they had a sufficient physical base to then layer on more steady state hikes that are specific to the walk, right? You know, you're going to be on your feet a long time. You need to practice being on your feet a long time. But they layered that on top of all the strength training that they've been doing for years, you know, training with me once or twice a week for literally years. And they were able to do it without injury and really enjoying the experience. And oh yeah, they walked hundreds of miles, right? You know, but they didn't set out to walk hundreds of miles initially. They just were fit enough to then be able to take on that challenge from the work that we're doing in here.
So out of character now,
Okay.
There's a couple of assumptions I'm making. I just want to talk about you briefly.
Sure.
You're very good at qualifying in pretty good fit people for smart strength. You like friction, is where I understand it of you. And I'm wondering, do you find that the type of explanations you give there, is that kind of blanket, like anyone who comes in, that's how you're going to address it? Do you find that, no, actually you've got, and this sounds kind of elitist, but you've got a smarter avatar who are on the same page as you? Because I just wonder if you had someone who isn't, do you ever sort of have an individual you think they're glazing over, I'm going to dumb it right down and keep it more succinct?
Absolutely.
Curious.
Absolutely. So the more succinct version is the first one in a lot of ways. The stronger you are, the more you move, you're going to get those benefits. You don't need to do the extra stuff. If you want to know more about that, awesome. I can tell you about it. But
okay,
the short version is, and then we could actually, in a lot of ways, you can return to what maybe Ken would say, if I'm going to dumb it right down, would be, hey, your muscles demand oxygen from your heart, and that burn that you feel is actually, they're producing waste from work.
Right.
So as it turns out, your cardiovascular system has to remove that too. That's why you're breathing heavier. That's that in a nutshell. If we can say you're feeling slightly out of breath or gassed between exercises, it's a demand on your cardiovascular system, and you'll notice over time that gets a little easier because you're getting fitter cardiovascularly.
Yeah. And so what would you normally do then? That type of reply or the longer, more technical reply?
No, I start with the very first one. The stronger you are, the easier it is to move. You're going to get more movement in the bargain. Walk
Okay.
more with your friend. Do that. You'll do more things that you like doing more and better because it feels good to move more and better. And
I'm
that
s-
counts.
I'm surprised to hear that because you're strapped for time, right? So how are you able to deliver that? Because let's assume this isn't an intro. This is like mid-session or
Yes.
like end of session where you are back to back.
Yep.
Will you allow that to maybe run over a little bit to get that out, or will you cut it like this is the succinct like reply in that
Yeah,
context?
it's just a read. I mean, it's a read
Yeah.
on the person because so let's say normally I've got a client who they're asking that question, they might get done 4 minutes before, and I'm normally peppering them with like, hey, we got time for one more exercise or something you want to do.
Sure.
I will just not even give them that option because they're asking. And if they're asking some clients ask, and I'm going to say it's not bad faith, but they're just trying to distract themselves a little bit, right, from the task at hand. And then that's also, this is important too, where it's like, when you realize what this person is trying to do, which is why we have a standardized onboarding process, by the way, when you know the person, then you can better tailor the answer. If it's just like, they are trying to, sort of wiggle off the hook of hard work that's going to happen regardless, but they need sort of like space. They can't concentrate for that long, or they're going to struggle with concentrating for that long. Then it's just, yep, stronger. You're going to walk more. Done. It's just not even. It's not even about giving them the technical stuff. But then you have clients who are genuinely curious. Like they want the rational connected pieces, A to B, B to C, C to D. And they also, those clients because they'll come back days or weeks later and say, hey, remember we were talking about this? I saw this other thing, And so it's almost like those are doorknobs to richer conversation, opportunities to demonstrate your expertise.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, the idea is you just need to give them the tip of the iceberg. Hey, when you're stronger, you move more. And as it turns out, the public health guidelines you're talking about that have recommended this type of movement they're not talking about running. They're talking about 20-minute per mile walks. When you're stronger, you're going to accrue that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll let you decide, but I'd love to hear some more tip of the iceberg responses to some of my future ones. And I just want to take a moment, to say Skyler has been extremely generous over the years, contributing great content to this podcast, but also in our membership, where you've been really open about the smart strength systems, how you onboard clients, how you do client assessments, how you do introductory workouts, like really open about, your kind of like business model, which we really appreciate. If anyone's interested in listening to this, if you're interested in getting help to build your strength training business and get access to that, please go to schoolwithak.com/HIB. You'll be able to see links wherever you're watching this. Awesome, Skyler. So next question, Skyler, how do I know I don't have it because I'm just very muscular and lean, but how do I get rid of the saggy skin on the back of my arms?
My first response is always the same. Like, you have to give yourself credit by flexing because I can make my back of my arm flex. Flexing. I literally do it. This is the first thing I said. I can create, we call them bingo arms sometimes because normally the little old ladies laughing. I can get first. So first of all, flex and give yourself credit. And then I say, now here's the bad news is that where's the fat on the steak? It's on the outside. The muscle's on the inside. So when you look at a steak, you got the ribbon of fat around the outside. Now just imagine that's your arm or your leg or your stomach. Everybody has a six-pack underneath. And the challenge is twofold. Is number one, you can feel yourself getting stronger. And if your body fat didn't change, you'd get a little bit more tone. But if you want even more definition, it's going to take more of a dietary intervention. And we can talk about protein and we can talk about sort of general guidelines. But if you want following the way that we're constructing this workout, I have dietitians and other colleagues who are just as excited about that and working with you on that as I am about building these time efficient, safe workouts to get you stronger and add lean tissue.
So out of character for a minute, So do you have partners you refer people to then for nutrition? You do
I
now?
have dietitians who I've worked
Oh,
with in
cool.
the past, and I just send them. I just send them all. I got one guy who he gained. Dex is an estimate just like anything else, but he's really excited because he gained like 8 pounds of lean tissue in his first 12 weeks with us, and then he wanted all this extra diet stuff, and it was great to hear this woman who's a registered dietitian, because he's sort of like super type A, like asking all the detailed questions and kind of thinking like there's 1,000 switches to control. And she's doing literally the same thing. She's like, we don't need to worry about that right now. But that's not, that may be important in the future, but right now it's this, and just shutting down the worrying and wondering and kind of like making it more complex than it needs to be before it needs to be complex. And as a result, he's gotten a little bit leaner because he's very fixated on this body fat percentage as probably told by Peter Attia or something like that. And so, but this is what she does, and she's excited to do it, and she's invested her time, energy, and resources in becoming good at what she does. So for the same reason, we send them to her.
Okay, so let me ask an annoying follow-up. So back to role play.
Okay.
But Skyler, I've been training with you, and I've done what you said in terms of the dietary guidelines, but I've still got this, this saggy skin on the back of my arm or bingo wing. How do I get rid of that?
Okay. So there's two things. There's body fat and saggy skin. What's the saggy skin made out of? It's made of all sorts of stuff, including collagen. For the same reason I have degenerative face and I can do all this, and people are told to have degenerative disc, your skin on your arms, nobody has solved crepey skin, right? Any 90-year-old woman you've seen, no matter how much cream she puts on, still looks like a 90-year-old woman, because in our genes, we produce less collagen with age. It's not an input side problem. It's not, I'm not eating enough protein. That would really be helpful for your bones and your muscles and other things. But you just produce cells more slowly. And as a result, your skin is less tight. The best way to make looser skin, it's like the net is looser. The best way to make looser skin look more tight is to, number one, have more muscle tissue pushing against that skin. And number two, to make sure that given your lifestyle and your goals, your body fat is as low as, or is low enough to show that muscle. That is the way to do it. We're going to focus on the strength piece here. That's what you're here for. The diet stuff is different. And that's why, again, if you want to go down that avenue, I have somebody for you who would like to work with you on that.
Yeah. So back to Lawrence. So you will always, that's clever. So you'll always like create a boundary, demarc, like we're referring you out, avoid that conversation in any great depth because that's not what you want to be focused on.
I mean, I can have that discussion and typically stick around protein. Like when we do body comp challenge, it's like, but look, this is going to produce a lot more headaches than you realize. We had a client recently go to a follow-up at our physician and they use an InBody. And, they're using some sort of data set that I'm not entirely, this woman is one of our strongest clients. Like she has just got a lot of strength on her, but she's not tall. So like the limb length is short, right? And so then the InBody is like, well, you have less muscle mass than you should in your legs. And I'm like, what data set is like, where are you getting that from? Because now all you've done is like create a huge amount of anxiety in this person. And then now I'm like, I want to get an InBody. I'd like to have this, but DEXA, BOD-POD, all of these, they're estimates. They're slightly more accurate estimates than like calipers. But you can, like, if you want to increase your lean body mass on an InBody or a DEXA, just eat before you go in. Hyperhydrate before you go in. Like that all reads as lean body mass. Like it just does. It's like food in your stomach. Cool.
Right. So she's doing a spot check, like a snapshot
once
in time.
A year because it's not moving your sport.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
And so now Mallory, our one of our senior exercise physiologists, she's having to like spend literally high percentages of multiple workouts trying to massage all the anxiety and show her like, DEXA scan, or not her DEXA, her InBody from when she used to work at F45 and like all the up and down. So it's like, now I'm having to do these hand motions, be like the trajectory is actually a range. And within that range, you're going to bounce up and down within it. Like it is distracting from the intended goal of strength. And I'm a big fan after all this time, like strength is the highest bit of feedback as far as lean tissue is concerned. I mean, multiple powerlifter studies. Powerlifting is great for this because it's a weight class sport. So if you get tested and non-suited federations, there are weight classes, right? So then you take the top 10 in every weight class who are finishing by strength, right? This is their total. And you put them in a DEXA scan. Even after everything I always said, it's still if done properly and they're pre days, like multiple days before protocols that you're adhering to leading up to the DEXA scan, the finishing order, strongest to 1 to 10, is like a 75 to 90% correlation with their lean tissue. Because bone can't flex, tendons just are reactive. They're just transferring force at speed. The only thing that it can be is an increase in the density of myofibrils within muscle fibers. Like that's it. That's a contractile element of muscle tissue. That is, and then your body will start to bifurcate these. They'll start splitting them in half when you reach the. I don't want to go off on a tangent. I'm not talking to a client. I'm talking to Lawrence.
Yeah.
Right. So hypertrophy doesn't work by adding more fibers. That's hyperplasia. We only see that in animal models. Maybe with anabolic steroids, but we don't know because no IRB board would do that study. But what happens is you have fibers, and then they're filled with these contractile elements of myofibrils. And this is where the actin and the myosin and the chitin all live, right? As you're recruiting towards task failure, your brain starts going, man, that recruitment costs, like it's a high voluntary effort to recruit the highest order motor units. The slow strain and the effort of recruitment is part of the stimulus. And since muscle fibers are contracted as a unit called a motor unit, it's not just like one fiber, it's a group of fibers that get turned on. There's a cost to turn on that group of fibers. So if you can increase the strength that those fibers have, then you don't have to recruit as many motor units for the same amount of force. But at some point you reach the limits of what the myofibrils can tolerate, and your body, this is fairly recent research, will split the myofibrils, and then you start feeling, so within a fiber, more and more of these in that space. James, after Fisher, after our last, after the strength summit forum,
Yeah,
it is a forum. I want to say, I don't want to say summit. Strength forum is the DS summit and the strength forum. There we go.
The strength summit sounds good, actually.
It does. Right. So the strength forum, he shared with me a piece of research that like the more trained people get, the more that it's like they're squeezing out all the extra space within the muscle belly because they're expanding in. The fibers themselves are expanding in towards the bone.
Could that mean that the muscle mass looks like can actually decline?
It doesn't.
No?
It's not that. It's not declining. It's that the density.
It's
like the difference between a select steak and a prime steak here in the United States, or like a Wagyu, where you got all that intramuscular fat.
So
as you get fitter, you squeeze out the intramuscular fat, and it's much more lean tissue within the same diameter. So you look harder, you look denser. I mean, this is part of what our clients feel, versus because there's a whole kind of fascial layer holding everything together. That's not going to expand out drastically on most people. But I digress. My point is that when we're talking about this with clients, we're never going to go into the weeds like that unless they have some amount of training or things of that nature. What we're going to do is we're going to keep it high level. We're going to talk about kind of like I'm, making jokes. I got degenerative face, for the same reason I got degenerative. Like it has nothing to do with, I didn't train, I didn't get enough collagen. Collagen is devoid of essential amino acids. As long as you're eating complete protein, your body can make all the collagen you would ever need. It's not a supply side issue. We are going to focus instead on, like I said, when we're talking with clients or dietitians or whatever, we're going to focus on the strength piece as the primary factor, because there's so much variability in the body fat measurement tools, even day to day, week to week. But I can't pin 400 pounds in the leg press because I want to and somebody can press it. Like I've just been holding back, pinning more weight. 200 pounds is 200 pounds. You can either move it or you can't. And of course, there's some variability based on how much sleep, how much coffee, etc. But it's a much higher fidelity measure than body composition because of the way that body composition is measured.
Yeah,
I have people focused on strength because, you can get stronger without gaining lean mass, but you can't gain lean mass without getting stronger.
Right. Interesting. Yeah.
But even, no, you can't. Right. So that's
have an in-body in your studio, right?
We're fixing to get one. And
okay, but you're having second thoughts because of this? Or?
Yeah, it's kind of, because do I want my team to have to deal with this anxiety bullshit, or am I going to have to come up with a whole set of socks to prep people before they do it? Hey, I know you want to, but also, do you like how you look in the mirror? Do you have an old pair of jeans that you used to fit into and you've kept them around just in case and you're almost fitting into them? Like, do you have some other means of determining body composition? Do you actually need to know? Right. But I think some people early on want it because they understand that that is proof. It's like a quantified proof of the efficacy of my programming. And I appreciate that. I understand that. And then I have to say, well, those are estimates and we can have variability in those estimates too. You can also trust your eyes. You can trust those old pants you used to have. Those are just as valid, because if you can't squeeze into those pants now and you can squeeze into them 6 months from now, you at least lost body fat.
Yeah, I also don't think
whatever percentage, who cares,
There's much more that's more empirical than just seeing how much you can crush on the leg press as well, right? Just the visceral feel, and I don't know. I know it's not like... Go ahead.
It is. To your point, yeah, right. Because I think clients understand. Well, then that's another question here with the strength. When are you going to stop? Am I ever going to stop getting stronger?
We'll go to that one.
We get that one all the time. Like, are you going to stop loading me all the time?
Because that's a great point. Yeah.
I'm so fixated on like putting weight on the bar over time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then the answer, so if Lawrence is like, hey, you put more weight on here, am I ever going to stop? Am I ever going to stop adding weight? And the short answer is, yeah, but not for years. And even then we're still going to try. Because
maintenance is regression. Sorry, I shouldn't.
Yeah. No. But I don't even say it like that. I say because you can get, because strength is the way you interact with the world. And the moment you start trying to maintain is when you start regressing, not because you're trying to, but because you may start letting yourself off the hook for those most stimulating repetitions, which are the highest effort repetitions. And you may not realize that you don't need to go all the way to task failure to get a stimulus. I've talked to you about that, Lawrence, but also my clients. And I explained most people have no concept for where task failure is. And we used to think, we didn't know how close you had to be to task failure in order to get a stimulus. But it's not like the magical strength and hypertrophy fairies show up at failure. They don't. You've got the last 5 repetitions before task failure. Your brain has recruited every single fiber it can recruit on the task. And that is starting to stimulate those fibers, which you don't use in your daily life. And as a result of not using them in your daily life, they are sensitive to getting stronger. And then your brain gets better at recruiting them for any other task you would need in your life, which reinforces you keeping them. And so if we stop trying to use those, you may start letting yourself off the hook in other areas of your life too. And then we start accelerating the loss of lean tissue. You're paying me to make sure that doesn't happen.
Beautiful. I love that. All right, let's go to another one, shall we? Skyler, but is once a week enough?
Yeah. Mathematically, as my mother-in-law, who has a master's in math and was a professor for 25 years, would say, 1 approaches infinitely more than 0. If you're not doing anything right now, and you try to eat the whole elephant, you're not going to be able to do it. Training once a week, as it turns out, is also the largest study ever done on resistance training. 10 years, 15,000 clients used a once a week protocol. It was not complicated. It was high effort. And those individuals got at least 50% stronger in their first year and almost 70% stronger by the end of year 2. And then it starts to slow down because the only things that grow to infinity are cancer in the stock market in the United States. And more practically, think about your growth. You're standing in front of me today as an adult. When did you grow the most? When does any human grow the most without intervention? Between the ages of about, well, from 0 to 1, but then through puberty, from 10 to 14 or 12 to 17, somewhere in that range, 4 to 5 years, right? And then that's the size they're going to be their whole life. It's kind of like that with resistance training. In the beginning, people get a lot stronger. Doing more than once a week, going to twice a week, does produce faster strength improvements. At some point, you're going to reach, to your previous question about, am I going to ever stop adding weight? At some point, you're going to reach near that maximum. We have to keep trying. Similarly, you're going to slow down. But when I say slow down, what the big data set suggests is that I don't know how much stronger you're going to get in these first 2 years. But whatever that is, between year 2 and 3, you might gain 10% more. If you're consistent, you don't have any injuries. Your diet is, I'm not saying perfect, just you're nourishing yourself. You're getting enough food to at least maintain your weight. And then year 3 to 4, it's 5%. And then year 4 or 5, et cetera, it's 1 to 2% per year on movements you've been consistent in. So once a week can get you that if it's programmed intelligently and we're focusing on putting weight on the bar, because you just asked. Am I ever going to stop putting weight on the bar? No, because that's actually the stimulus. If we're going to always do between 8 and 12 repetitions or be constrained within a repetition range and do one set, and we want those repetitions to be stimulating, which is why you're here. You're here to be stimulated. And we have a constraint. We have a 30-minute window to do this. Then the set has to be meaningful. And, not to put too fine a point on it, but we have lots of data on this now. In order to double the efficacy of the first set, we need to do 4 to 6 more sets. The law of diminishing returns. Where else in your life have you seen that? Well, the first hour of focused work is probably pretty good. The second hour is not as great, and so on and so. Well, your kid's doing homework, these things that first input is the most outsized and meaningful. And it's the same thing with the resistance training once a week. So twice a week is more comprehensive. It is faster towards that ceiling, but it's not twice as good, twice as fast, or twice as effective. And so if you can't do twice a week because it's cost too much or you don't have the time, we can take you the whole distance with once a week. And as it turns out, you have to do this stuff until you die anyway. So why don't we find a frequency?
Do you say that to people, eh? Sorry.
Absolutely.
I love that.
There's no fitness interest you live on. There's not like, all right, we're going to Scrooge McDuck this thing. I put all my fitness in the vault and I'm just going to swim around in it until I die. If you stop your blood pressure medicine, your blood pressure goes up. If you stop the diet and you go back to YOLOing your way through food, your weight's going to go back up. Anything you stop is going to regress. It's the nature of our bodies. So if you can do once a week without fail between now and death, you're going to accrue all the possible benefits that you can get. It's just going to take longer to get there. Okay. But what are you in a hurry for?
So I'm running out the door. You've got another client just coming. There's like 1 minute I ask you the same question. I always poke my head back in. Skyler,
yeah,
is once a week enough though? What's your tip of the iceberg response in that context?
I said once a week enough. The largest study ever done on resistance training was done on once a week people, and they got at least 50% stronger in their first year. Could you imagine how much better your average American's life would be if they were 50% stronger?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Open-ended, and then they just
Open and it ended, and I just let them kind of sit with it. Just think about what they're going to do with their life with that much more strength.
Yeah, they just let that detonate in their brain in that moment. Okay, next one. I need to work on my balance, Skyler. Will strength training help me with that?
Yes, it will. And what do you think balance is?
Balance is, just my ability to, prevent myself from falling over or balancing on a balance beam or something like that.
Right. So keep yourself upright over your base of support. In this case, your feet, right? You know what else is part of the balance equation? Your eyes and your inner ear. I can't do anything about that. If you suddenly change your glasses or you have some sort of inner ear issue you don't know about, I can't do anything about that. But as far as the muscles that control the hips, knees, and ankles, and also your feet, we can make those stronger. The stronger they are, the lower your risk of fall is, vis-a-vis improvements in balance. But muscular strength in the legs is not the only thing. And a lot of that stuff's outside of what we do. And so if you're getting stronger and you wear glasses, do you have contacts, and all of a sudden you need to change your glasses or contacts, that will mess with your balance. So these are things to keep in mind going forward. We're always going to train the muscles that help you get up, stay up, and move. Make those stronger. But I can't do anything about the eyes, and I can't do anything about the inner ear. But I have PTs who they specialize in vestibular issues. And so if you're getting stronger, but you're still feeling your balance is off, I could always refer you out to them, and they can make sure that it's not something outside of what we can work on in here.
Okay. All right. Back to Lawrence. So that's interesting. I didn't even know that was a discipline. So what is that? Explain that just briefly?
It's a doctor of physical therapy, but it's or a physio, right? But it's a subspecialty in balance and neuromotor issues. I mean, we say neuromuscular generally. Up the road here from me, they call themselves 360 Balance. 360 is one of the highways here with a really iconic bridge here in Austin. And they have a handout that I have a picture of that has all of the input. You could find this online. It's a pretty common one amongst PTs. And this would actually be really good for all of you who are trainers to keep one of these, or at least keep a picture of one of these, because clients don't know this. I learned about it in graduate school in the biomechanics lab. We had a whole giant hulking piece of equipment to try to figure out where the balance deficit might be. They would move the ground, and you had a harness on, so if you pitched over, it would catch you. They would move the ground underneath you and see if they could throw you off balance. Well, then maybe it's the legs, right? Because if we're changing the base of support and you can't meet the load demands, the force demands quickly enough, fast twitch fibers strengthening, then you're going to fall over. Okay. But if that's happening, you don't move. Okay. Well, your base of your strength is probably sufficient. And then they would start having you move your eyes around to try to throw you off. Because if you're standing there and you start moving your eyes, some people, they start to get, or they move their head, they start to lose their space. And dancers, you'll see them when they're spinning, they're whipping their head around to find, they're spotting, they call it. They're finding a place to look at with their eyes so that their horizon line is controlled for. And yet if you can move your eyes around, okay, that's fine, and you don't immediately fall over, then they'll have you close your eyes. And now you're relying on your inner ear, which is almost like the sort of gyroscope thing you see on the airplane, the horizon line, relative. And if you close your eyes and you almost fall over, then we go like, oh, it might be your inner ear, it might be your vestibular apparatus. We can affect that a little bit in the facility, but it's like, okay, how do you? Then I started to think about client experience and what they're there for. I'm like, I could have you stand on kind of like a squishy pad and hold your eyes shut and feel movement, but not freak out about it, building sway in the wind. But I would rather send you to somebody just to make sure that to help assuage your fears about your balance, while still training all the muscles that we can make much stronger that are going to help you catch yourself. Oh, and by the way, if you have more strength and lean tissue and you do suffer a fall, you are less likely to break a bone, even if that doesn't show up on a DEXA scan, because you have more lean tissue to act as a shock absorber at impact.
Perfect.
Which is why NFL players don't get detonated by other men who are equally as large when they get hit. It's not just the pads, it's the fact that they have a lot of muscle mass and subsequently also have really strong bones to go with it. So they can tolerate that sort of load.
Yeah. All right. Final question before we wrap. This is going to be the most common one. Guess what it is? I'm gonna have you guess. That's the one that our colleagues struggle with the most. Do you think?
Can you make my butt big? Can you make my butt smaller?
I wasn't going to do that one. I
Okay.
would do that one if we had time, but I think this is probably more something that people are struggling with, which is the Skyler. How do I lose the gut? How is this going to help me lose weight?
This might not be something you have in wet and woolly Ireland, but I think about having grown up in the American Southwest. What I say to people is actually, I say, the stomach's the deep end. So you've never seen somebody in your life with ripped abs and like jowls and flabby arms. The stomach's the deep end for a lot of evolutionary reasons that we're not going to go into. But what I imagine it as is sort of like, have you ever seen a half-empty pool? The shallow end is bone dry, but the deep end's got brackish water. This is your brackish water. And that's why I don't go into the forecasting game, and I don't encourage my clients to go into the forecasting game of, I just need to lose 10 pounds and then I'm going to look a certain way. You look the way you look when you weigh what you weigh. But if you've been diligently working on losing body fat and, you've got your diet dial in or whatever, the longer you're dieting, the closer you get to that lowest point, the longer it's going to take to lose, because as far as your body is concerned, you're starving, right? So that's not a bad thing. Obviously, you're not in front of me, you're getting adequate nutrition, but you've been in an energy deficit for a really long time. So if you've been, and I've just started training you and you're asking me about this, but if you've been dieting for a while before you got in here, I'm glad you're in here because you lost some muscle mass and we're going to replace that. You're going to see the scale move up. Don't fret, it's lean tissue. And that may also help spur on some more losses because your metabolic rate's going to go up a little bit. But also what you want, the behavior you want, or you want the new plateau. You want a lower plateau when you get down to the leanness that you are seeking. Those are a set of behaviors that are different than just losing weight. Americans are great at losing weight. We know how to lose weight. We know how to gain weight. Most people don't know how to maintain weight. So what I'd suggest is if you've been dieting for a while and you're asking me that question, maybe now's the time to try to maintain the weight that you're at for 3 to 6 months. And then get back to trying to lose, because fat's not just a storage vessel. Fat also contributes to your hormone profile, and that may also be some of the reason why you're struggling to lose fat. And if you've never even tried, then let's not focus on that right now. Let's focus on just getting you stronger and talking you through some low-hanging fruit that you can improve in your life to help move the needle on your stomach.
So, but if I do this strength training, Skyler, it's going to burn this body fat, right? I'm going to be burning calories, going to burn all this body fat off me. No?
Nope. It was always, when you hear them together, what does it say? Diet and exercise, not just exercise. It's diet and exercise. And with exercise, it's strength and conditioning. It's an and, not an or. Diet and exercise. Now, people will be surprised as they get stronger and they add lean tissue, how their shape changes. And then they maybe don't need to lose as much fat as they originally thought because they now have more muscle tissue.
Yeah. I like it. Good.
Yep.
I love it. Skyler, it's been super useful. I actually like it how we went through fewer questions, but we went into the weeds. I think it just gives a different dimension to all of this. And I think it's useful for the listeners to hear how you articulate some of this stuff, because you're so... I really admire, like, obviously I've known you for a long time and we talk often, and your passion for what we do never wavers. Like, you're always so into exercise and just so open-minded and always reading the latest research. And it's awesome to see. And I learned so much from you. So, so look, I guess if people want to check in with you and learn more about you, we'll send them to smartstrengthaustin.com. So that's where you find Skyler's business, Smart Strength, and see what they're up to and see their beautiful new website as well. Right. And look, thanks again for doing this. Really appreciate it as always. And for everyone that's listening, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Lawrence and Skyler with highintensitybusiness.com. Once again, if you want to join our community and get help with building your strength training business, you can get a free trial currently at score.com/HIB. That stands for high intensity business. Thanks so much, Skyler. I'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lord.